Hello and welcome. My name is AJ Williams, and I am the Senior Associate Director here of Admission here at Santa Clara University, and I'm joined today by one of our stellar student ambassadors.
Yeah, hi guys, my name is Ryan Lund. I'm a sophomore computer engineering major. I'm from Portland, Oregon. Welcome and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. This is our very first Facebook Live event of the year, and this one is geared towards the application process. So if you are a student, counselor, parent, let us know where you're from. And as we kind of wait for folks to sign on and send us questions and things like that, like us. If you're a student, let us know, what year you are in school, what high school you attend, what you're thinking about majoring in, and things like that. We're also running on Facebook, on Instagram as well. And at the end of this, if we haven't gotten to a question of yours, you'll be able to email us at admission@scu.edu, and we'll get back to you. Alrighty. And so, Ryan, did you want to take some time and introduce yourself to the folks?
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, my name is Ryan from Portland, Oregon, computer engineering major. So some of the things I'm involved with here on campus, besides being a student ambassador, which is my on-campus job, I'm a huge nerd, so I'm involved in ACM and SKID, which are two of the engineering clubs, and also some abbreviations that probably mean nothing. But anyway, so SKID is Santa Clara Innovation Design. It's the design club here on campus. And then ACM is our local computer science club. It's a chapter from ACM, which is a national organization. So we kind of get together for hackathons and do different projects together, go to talks or to the computer museum, computer history museum, stuff like that, fun stuff. And also involved in CLC, which is a campus ministry here. And I'm part of just a small group that meets once a week. It's a good opportunity to stop, reflect, talk to the people, see how they're doing. Just a great chance to, like I said, just take some time for yourself.
Very cool. And myself, I'm actually one of the few admission counselors in the office who didn't attend Santa Clara. I'm a native of San Jose, but I've lived all over the country, in the Four Corners to be exact, and kind of bounced around in school playing basketball, East Coast, and back home to a community college, then ended up at a small school, the University of Puget Sound up in Washington. Fell into admission and have been doing it for close to about 14 years, so mostly here at Santa Clara, but a couple years before that at Puget Sound. And so, I like it and really I enjoy it for these kind of moments, right? You can kind of shed some light on this process for folks, maybe make a light bulb or two go off.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's what we're here today.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So cool. So let's get into the application process, and sort of I'll start it off with just kind of touching on the typical components of an application. And so, a lot of institutions out there either utilize their own university-specific application, or they're part of the Common App, right? And so the Common App is what Santa Clara utilizes. It's what about 750 plus universities utilize. And so, the basic components are obviously the Common Application itself, but then a lot of universities will have a specific supplemental section of that, and Santa Clara definitely has one of those, right? And so not additional essays per se, but maybe some short answer questions and things like that. And so the Common App, the supplement, the fee, transcripts, obviously, we got to know what you did, how you did, that's very important. Test scores, and so the SAT, the ACT, many universities don't have a preference for either test. My advice is really for applicants to take both tests at least once, because they test the same material, but students tend to respond a little differently. Actually, recently, the ACT has overtaken the SAT in popularity.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That was what I was good at. That was when I did, because I was not good at the SAT.
Yes. Other than that, letters of recommendation, many schools, I'll say, many sort of medium or smaller schools will require at least one. For Santa Clara, we require one. You can send up to 3. Let's see. And then other than that, when applying, a lot of times you either have to apply directly to a particular school within the university, like say arts and sciences or business or engineering here at Santa Clara. Or if it's a larger school, like say a state system school, because of the sheer size of those schools, you have to sometimes declare or apply directly to a specific major, Other than that, additional things might be, again, if you're applying to a large school or a very specific program at an institution, subject tests, right? Things like the SAT2s and things like that might be required. But these days, I think I just saw online, Google turned 19 today, right? So we live in a good day and age. You can Google the requirements for all your schools.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Definitely.
Yep. I don't know, did you want to take some time and sort of reflect on your college application process and just sort of your search and all of that?
Yeah, definitely. Kind of take myself back to all of 2 years ago, which was way longer than that. Yeah, so for me, I just kind of made a huge list of all the different colleges that I haven't had so much of a fleeting interest in, and that list was about 20 schools, so I knew I had to narrow it down. And so the way I did that was I kind of said, okay, well, does this school have the programs that I'm interested in? And at the time, as a senior in high school, I was deciding between, okay, well, should I do business or engineering? Those were kind of the two things that I had a big interest in, and obviously you can't take many of those classes in high school, so I wasn't really sure which one I wanted to do, which one I would be interested in. So I kind of looked at the different programs, said, like, bare minimum requirements, this is what I want to do. And then also looked at, okay, well, what kind of a good fit would this school be for me? And so that had things to do with, like, where is the school? Being from Portland, Oregon, I kind of wanted to stay on the West Coast, so I narrowed down to West Coast schools. I then, sized the school, so I said, all right, I kind of want a school that's small enough that I can have good class sizes, but if I'm going to do engineering, I also want to have the resources that are going to, be able to permit for things like that. And so after going through all those things, I was left with about 8 or so schools, and I went and visited all of those schools. And some students will decide to visit the schools before or after. Sometimes people will apply to schools, get in, and then visit in the spring. I did the reverse. I visited the schools my junior year of high school and then applied my senior year. And then when it was all said and done, after I visited, I had about 4 schools left from that my list of 20 that I applied to, Santa Clara being my top choice. And I was lucky enough to get in and go from there. But yeah, there's a lot of other smaller factors that go into it, kind of, what the campus is like, how you feel when you visit, things of that nature. One thing that made a big difference for me was talking to SU alumni. I think that if you're really stuck between a few different schools, talk to the people who've been through the school and graduated. And the reason I say that is because a university is not just a place you go for a college experience, it's also the college experience, how is it going to affect you going forward. And after I talked to the Santa Clara alumni, that was the right choice for me personally. So I think, yeah, and at the end of the day, the biggest thing is fit. So, be true to yourself, say, these are my strengths, and I really want a school where I can use those, and then also say, these are some weaknesses that I have, and these are the places where I'm going to need a little extra help in deciding the school.
No, you touched on a variety of things there, and some great points that I kind of want to spend some time kind of teasing out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
and
sure.
What I tell folks is that, one, there are a ton of options out there. So when we say in this country, 4-year institutions, there are close to 2,800 of those, right? Like 2,774 to be exact, right?
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and so, when kind of sort of think of just getting started from ground zero, thinking about, okay, where can I see myself going to school? It's important to do your research. And one of the things you said was location, right? So if you were born on the West Coast and you've watched movies and fallen in love with New York, you might want to visit before you attend school there, because it gets cold,
Yeah, no kidding.
And, so it's important to sort of do your research in that sense. And another thing, not only sort of the location and just in terms of the weather and things like that, but like you said, having an idea of what you see yourself doing down the line, because universities have their strongest connections, for job opportunities, internships, and things like that.
Yeah.
Not only in their immediate community, but in their region, right? And so, and another thing is, how long have they been around? Do they have alum that are spread out throughout the country? That's important to look at. But yeah, so really, a lot of different options out there. And of those schools, of those thousands of schools, really they fall into one of 3 categories. And I always like to sort of explain that to folks, by size. I think for students in particular, things are more tangible that way, right?
Yeah,
and so, universities really fall into one of 3 categories. And so when you hear that term liberal arts college, a traditional liberal arts college is usually going to be one of your smaller schools population-wise, right? Might range in size from around 1,000 students to maybe 4,000 to 5,000 on the high end. Those schools usually have smaller class sizes, smaller student-faculty ratios, very high 4-year grad rates, right? Because you have access to the resources that you need. Your ability to maybe do undergraduate research and get published is probably going to be pretty strong at a school like that. And that's why, when talking to parents, you'll often see a pretty big price tag difference between public education and private education, because usually private schools are smaller and afford those sort of luxuries, during your time in school. On the flip side, you have much larger institutions, which are usually much larger, because they're for the public, right? And so they're built to be more accessible. And you'll see populations that range from 10,000, 20,000, 40,000 on up past 70,000, right? And so the reality is you'll see classes there you might luck out. You might have a class of 30, but in general, you're going to have classes of 100, 300, 400. In my years of doing this, the largest class I've ever heard of is about 1,500, and so, those classes are usually led by TAs or graduate students who are a little bit older than you, maybe in terms of material, might be a chapter or two ahead of you, because the professors are doing research, which is why they call those schools flagship R1 research institutions, and so those are the two sort of ends of the spectrum. Medium-sized schools, and Santa Clara kind of falls in that range. We're a medium-sized school, anywhere from that sort of 5,000 to 15,000 range. Here at Santa Clara, we're about 5,400 undergraduate students. We do have grad students, about 3,100 of them, but we're limited with our grad offerings, and most of those folks are working professionals. So they take classes in the morning and the evening. Point being, as an undergrad, it's an undergrad-centric experience, right? And so smaller class sizes, smaller student-faculty ratios, all that good stuff. How's that experience been for you in terms of, not only here at Santa Clara, but in terms of just the schools that you were looking at?
Definitely. When I started out, I wasn't exactly sure if I wanted to go to a really small school, an inside school, or kind of a really, really big state school like AJ mentioned. But that's why I went and visited those schools to kind of get a feel for it. I walked on the campuses of a few schools that had 20, 30, 40,000 students, and I knew kind of right off the bat that wasn't for me. And again, that's kind of what the decision is this right for me personally? Is this an environment where I'm going to be able to thrive? And so I just knew off the bat that wasn't going to be something that was going to work for me. And then for the small school environment, I knew that going into engineering, and it did end up being what I wanted to pursue, it's really hard to get kind of the tools that you need in engineering at a small school. So that's the benefit of Santa Clara, is that it's large enough that as an engineer in our labs, we have the resources that we need as engineers to be able to learn the material that we need to do and do the research that we want. But we still get that benefit of the small class sizes. So for me, that was why Santa Clara made sense in that sense. And then, like you said, I think the small class sizes, again, is the reason that a lot of people end up choosing the smaller end schools and justifying the price tag that can usually come along with that. I remember when I took my tour at Santa Clara 2 years ago, my tour guide talked about how one of his good friends had gotten a job through his professor because they were really, really close friends and they knew each other so well. And that's not something that's terribly uncommon. You hear about that quite a lot. And so after hearing about that, I knew that being able to develop close relationship with my teacher, like I said, I'd had private education and I've been used to being able to go up and talk to my teachers and have a one-on-one relationship with them. I knew that was something that would be really important for me. And it's kind of just something that helps nurture you a little bit more. Not in the sense that the teachers and professors aren't going to hold your hand just because there's 20 students in the class. In fact, it's kind of going to be the opposite because they're going to know if you're not there. But it's for me, it was a better environment and something that I was a better fit for me.
Sure. Okay. How about any tips that you might have for applicants in terms of we always get the question, how do I stand out as an applicant, something like that. And there's really honestly no sort of magic answer I have for students, but in terms of just sort of the actual application itself and the different parts, what kind of maybe tidbits might you have for an applicant?
Yeah, definitely. I think the things that I wish that I would have known, going back to the application process, were one, just be true with yourself, just be honest. I think that's really beneficial. Different schools, institutions are different for different reasons. That doesn't mean that they're any better than the others. So I think that if you're really honest with yourself and you say, in your application and whatnot, this is the kind of person that I am, this is the kind of person that I hope that your university can make me. AJ's going to read that and he's going to say, he knows this really well, he's going to be able to say, this is a place where you're going to be able to make those strides and do those types of things. And if it's not, then it's not. And I think that, as an applicant, you want to go to the place that's going to be the best fit for you and find the place that, you want to make your home for the next 4 years. I think that's something that people talk about a lot in the college application process. But that being said, you won't know if it's your home right off the bat. Like I said, I visited, 8 different schools, or a lot more than that. I visited, like I said, like 9, 10, maybe 12 schools. And through those 12 different visits over the various weekends of driving or, being in my cousin's town, so I went and saw the university there, whatever might have been the case, I did not walk onto a single campus and say, this is it, right off the bat. I knew that this is where I wanted to be. And so I think that that's another thing too, is that, you know, you have, like I just said, almost 3,000 universities you're having to decide between. And I think that when you have that many options, it's easy to tell yourself, well, I need to find, you know, the perfect school that has every little aspect. You know, different schools are different for different reasons. And I know that for me, at least, I tried to cherry pick all the different things I liked about certain schools and try to form them into one school and find it. And I think that that's an easy thing to do. And it's a great way to kind of cut down on the schools that you're applying to, but at the same time, you may not see a school where you right off the bat know this is going to be the perfect fit for me. Sometimes it can be a tough decision, but at the end of the day, yeah, just going back to, you know, trying to rationalize it and find just a good fit.
Yeah, all good points, all good points. So in terms of timing, yeah, we definitely want to leave time for folks to send us in any questions or get to any questions that might have come in while we were talking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll turn to our lovely assistants and see if we have anything that's come in thus far.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. Let's see. First question. Do we know what it is from? No, we don't. All right. So is taking the December SAT too late? That is a very vague question. So what I would say is it too late for what, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing that we didn't touch on in the application process is that a lot of schools have an early time period that you can apply and then regular decision, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, for most deadlines, and again, this is, you know, where you're going to want to do your research, but for Santa Clara in particular, our deadline for early decision and action, one binding, one not, is November 1st, right? So yes, the December SAT or ACT would be too late, right? But January 7th is our regular decision time frame. And so what I tell folks all the time is that with any institution that is early decision, if you hear that term ED, that means it's binding in some sense, right? Early action usually is not unless it's restrictive or something like that. And so my advice to students, and in particular with Santa Clara specifically, is that because we consider students the same for any sort of merit-based or academic monies or need-based funding, no matter the time period, early or regular, I always kind of put the ball in the student's court and say, if you can be honest with yourself and look at our averages and look at your situation and feel pretty confidently that by November 1st you're the strongest applicant you're going to be, go ahead and apply, because you'll find out sooner, right?
Yeah.
Less headache, you know. But if not, and you're in a situation where, you know, maybe you're applying elsewhere early, you know, in restricted or decision, and so, you know, or you're banking on progress in that senior year, you're really going to buckle down in your first semester, boost your GPA, or take a test that is later than our deadline, and you want us to consider that, then you should apply regular, you know. And so early decision is one thing that's always important to note, is that, you know, you're essentially saying, hey, if I get into this institution, I plan on making it work, right? And so, you know, probably not the best route to go if, you know, finances are going to be a big concern, and you want to be able to compare, you know, cost at the end, which is a reality for most folks.
Yeah, huge part of the college decision, definitely.
All right, so next question. Let's see. All righty, let's see. What key factors make an application stand out? Okay, and so I'll take this one. How many applications have you read? Not too many? Okay, all right, cool. So I'll take this one. Let's see. You know, and again, this is, as I mentioned before, this is kind of one of those questions that we always get, right, as admissions folks. Usually we get it in the 11th hour, right? A student is a senior and about to apply and say, what can I do to make my application stand out?
Yeah.
And honestly, there's one, I tell folks off the bat, this isn't rocket science, you know? And you know, most schools in the country, if you folks at home remember nothing else from this, and I hope you do remember more than that, but most schools in the country really have admit rates in that sort of 50-50 range, right? Either you get in or you don't, you know? We all know and can probably name some schools right off the top of our list, a very small percentage of all the schools in the country that have single-digit admit rates, or in the teens or 20s. But the reality is you have schools in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s on up to the 80s, right? And so the average for all those schools that we mentioned are really in that sort of 50-50 range. That said, you know, for schools that, like us, are making a holistic review, and we're looking at the personal side, and we're looking at the academics really they speak for themselves. You know, a GPA tells me how much of a student you were day in and day out. Did you go to class, pay attention, take good notes, you know, that kind of thing. A test score does not tell us how intelligent you are. you know, it's a test you take on 5 hours on a Sunday or Saturday after prom or something. I don't know, some homecoming or something. You know, so, but the fact that everybody takes it, we can say, how'd you do? You know?
Yeah.
The personal side is that window, and it's that small window, really, for applicants to say, this is me as an individual, this is what makes me interesting, this is what I'm bringing to a classroom conversation or the campus environment or a roommate situation.
Yeah.
You know, and so these days and age, we really try to bring in interesting people that are going to make, you know, Santa Clara a more enriching experience for everybody. You know, and so, yeah, so for the folks who asked that, I know that's pretty vague, and you're probably saying, whatever, AJ. But that's the reality of it. You know, there's no magic answer to that. Do we have time for a couple more? One more? All right.
Awesome. Let's get to it.
Yep. Ryan, how many colleges and universities did you apply to? We'll see if they were listening. But
Yeah, all said and done, I applied only to 4 schools, and the reason for that is that I kind of narrowed down the application process along the way. I visited a lot of schools, kind of just out of convenience that. You know, my family was traveling to certain places, and the universities that I was by were an hour or 2 away, so we would just drive to them. So I'd kind of gotten to see the schools that I wanted to see, and decided whether or not I was really interested in applying to them or not. So I kind of knew which schools I was really interested in going to. So, like I said, only applied to 4. Saved my parents money as opposed to applying to 12 or so schools. You know, because there's an application fee that goes along with a lot of that.
Which is probably around what, $50 to $60, or what would you say?
Yeah, $60. Some school it's like $100.
Yeah. So do that math at home, parents, for your students who want to apply to 20 to 30 schools. You know, but yeah, so very cool.
Yeah, it's different for everyone, but for me, I kind of knew what schools I was interested in.
Yeah, I think the national average is around like 10 or 11. You know, schools, and that's. I think that's for females, right? And then fellas get to a good 5 or 6 before that good ADD kicks in and you go play video games or something. You know. And so, what time for one more? Yeah. All righty, or a couple more. Let's see. What did you write about for your personal statement?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So for me, I had a big experience in my high school where I kind of played basketball throughout middle school and high school, like freshman and sophomore year, and in the summer between my sophomore and junior year, which for anyone who doesn't know, for basketball it's a really big summer because that's when you play summer ball, AU, all that stuff. I had gotten hurt that summer, and when I got hurt, I kind of I hurt my hip really bad, so I just laid down in bed for like a month and missed the whole summer, and so I kind of had to reevaluate what I was doing, kind of with my life, if I wanted to keep doing basketball, if I wanted to try some other stuff. And I ended up realizing that I'd spent all of my time playing basketball and kind of gotten tunnel vision just doing that. And so from that, I decided that I was going to try some other things and figure out what I wanted to do, because I was going to go to college in 2 years and I had zero idea what I wanted to study. So I figured I should try some other things.
You can't study basketball, right?
Yeah, no, I wish. So I kind of also learned a bit about myself. I think it's good to know yourself in the college application process. And so I did that. I went out and tried theater, which ended up being a great experience for me. Got involved in the student ambassadors program at my high school, funny enough, and got involved in the retreat program at my high school as well. So all of those were great experiences with me, and I kind of just talked about how that experience, what I was able to gain from it in terms of learning how important it is to take time to reflect, and kind of the lessons I learned from that. And I wrote about that because it was the most powerful story of anything that I had gone through and that happened to me. It was the story that most I thought made me me, if I kind of thought back to my experiences throughout high school and my life. And that was why I went ahead and wrote it, was because I knew that, you know, that there's thousands of applicants and there's only one you, and that you want to find the best fit for you. So try to find a story that represents that the best. And that can be anything. It doesn't have to be sports related or anything like that, or extracurricular activity. It can be something about your family or anything of the type, you know, or just the story that, you know, best represents you.
Okay. Alrighty. Next question: important factors that Santa Clara wants in an essay or in essays. You know, again, there's no silver bullet magic answer to this. The Common App, which is what we employ, has about 5 or 6 different prompts on it. You know, and I think there is write about an influential person in your life, an influential event in your life, something like that. And we see a lot of those, right? We see a lot of those community service essays, we see athletics essays, things like that. I always love it when, you know, there's that last prompt, which is write about any topic that you'd like. And I love it when folks have the courage to do that, you know, because again, you know, we live in very interesting times, and in a lot of ways that's exciting. As a university, we have a mission statement, as most institutions do, right? But we're a Jesuit Catholic institution, so ours, you know, social justice, doing for others, that kind of thing. And so, you know, what I tell folks is that if there's any way that you can ever make those things intertwine and talk about, like you were mentioning, what you're passionate about, what you can see yourself doing down the line, and tie that into what a university is about, then that's a good thing, you know. And so I, every year, save one or two, if not more, you know, quality essays, and I'll share that with folks, and I love it when that student actually comes and I can tell them I'm using your essay, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's just, you know, be brave enough to be different.
Yeah.
Because when it all comes and goes, and like I mentioned before, you know, over the years probably read over 20,000 essays. The ones that stand out to me aren't the sort of cookie cutter ones. They're the ones that are, you know, the folks kind of stepped outside the box and talked about some real things, things that you know that I might be dealing with in life or trying to figure out.
Being honest.
So yeah, just being honest. So that's again, I know they're sitting at home. He's too vague. What's he talking about? But that's how it goes. Yeah. All right. And this is our last one. All right, here we go. If you're undecided about what you want to study, what program at SCU should you apply to?
You want to take me and take that?
If you know what, I want you try that.
I think that really depends. So one thing to understand about kind of how the schools work in Santa Clara is that since I'm in the engineering school is the smallest of the schools on campus, so there's a lot less spots in it. So if I wanted to transfer to, say, the Arts and Sciences school, I decide that I would rather study biology or theater, English, or something of that nature, then I can fairly easily transfer in the Arts and Sciences school and, you know, go through that process and study that. Whereas if you're someone in the Arts and Sciences school or the business school who wants to transfer into engineering, or you're in the Arts and Sciences and you want to transfer into business, kind of, if you're trying to go from a bigger into a smaller school, that's much more difficult to do. It's not impossible. There's a girl who is in my computer engineering class who studied U.S. history last year and decided that she'd rather do computer engineering, and so now she's doing it. So it's not that it's impossible, but it definitely is a lot easier. So let's say that you're not sure if you want to do mechanical engineering or accounting, or maybe do something totally different and do like neuroscience. You know, if you're deciding between those things, I would recommend going into the engineering school, or trying to apply to that engineering school first. And if you know that you do not want to do engineering at all, maybe you're trying to decide between business or arts and sciences, then apply to the business school, and then if you don't like it, you can just go down the arts and sciences school. So I'd say try to apply to the one where that's the highest one that you, or I guess the smallest one that you're interested in going to, so that way if you decide that it's not for you, you can easily transfer down, whereas it's much harder to go the other way.
Right, definitely. Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that you touched on is, you know, when applying to Santa Clara, you do choose a college, right? So one of the three. For us, our policy is whatever school you're admitted into, you're in that program for at least your first year, then you can try to change,
right.
And so, you know, and online, folks can go and look on our website and see sort of the different averages for the different schools. If you were looking at it on the continuum, you had everybody, arts and sciences, business, then engineering, right? And so, you know, as our average GPA, or excuse me, our average test score overall for the ACT or for the SAT was around 1360. For engineering, it's a 1440. Right, it's our smallest division. We're in the Mecca in terms of resources, right, in Silicon Valley. So it's very competitive. And so what I tell folks all the time is that if you have any inclination that you want to do anything business or engineering related, it makes more sense to apply to one of those programs right off the bat. Because from day one, they have to take classes in arts and sciences, right? Your English, math, science, the sort of general ed courses are mostly housed in arts and sciences. So it's easier to be in those programs and have a second major or minor and anything arts and sciences related. It gets a little tougher the other way around. But regardless, I think, and I always fall back on this, you know, we do a pretty good job of here at Santa Clara in terms of not only getting folks in, but getting them out. And once they're out, you know, them being productive, that kind of thing. So I always return to our retention rate, which is, you know, the amount of folks who from their first year continue on the second year. It's like 96%. And our 4-year graduation rate. You know, not 4, not 5, not 6. Our 4-year graduation rate is also one of the higher 4-year grad rates in the country at 85%. What that means and what that speaks to is the fact that our college students change their mind just as much, if not more, because we're in the quarter system, right? So things move quickly.
Yeah,
They change their mind just as much as any other college student in the country, but they're still able to come in, figure things out, get out on time,
Yeah,
and go on and be pretty productive with themselves. You know, so so that's my advice there. So. In closing, thank you folks for joining us. Ryan, man, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, AJ. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure.
Definitely. If there were questions that we didn't get to that you would like us to, maybe down the line, you email admission, which is ADMISSION. Yeah, I got it. With no S at the end, at scu.edu. And we will do our best to get back to you. And so thank you, goodbye, and also join us next Thursday at 11 a.m. For the financial aid talk as we continue these throughout the year. So thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.